It's always easy at the beginning, isn't it? Everything feels vivid. Your memories, your emotions. You're open to new experiences and ready to take on the world. There's no weight of past resentments, bitterness, or disappointments. Just hope for the best. Each day brings something new, and the most captivating thing is the sparkle in someone's loving eyes. Back then, I was 21. I'd just come out of the tough experience of ending my first real love. She was barely 18. Out of sheer boredom, I started drinking in the evenings, logging online, and sending out the usual, "Hey, how's it going?" Most people ignored it. Some replied. Later, she'd say, "I don't even know why I accepted it." I invited everyone out for a walk. A few agreed, and we'd stroll around, chat, share funny stories, grab something to eat, and gaze at the stars. But nothing really clicked with me. She, though, kept me at a distance for a long time, barely responding, sometimes not saying anything at all. Gradually, we started talking more. Finally, she agreed to go for a walk. It was spring, and for the first time in ages, I felt something stir in my chest. That cold, frozen piece of ice inside me began to thaw. No, she didn't have the supermodel body, the skirt riding high, flawless makeup, or plump lips. But suddenly, the sky shifted from a dreary gray to a clear blue, perfectly matching the color of her eyes. Her scent was intoxicating, and the delicate, trusting touch of her fingers in mine filled me with joy. Before long, we started dating. I can still remember our first kiss as if it happened yesterday. The first night we spent together, without intimacy, is still vivid in my memory, as if it was just the other day. I'd been with other women before her, and she wasn't exactly a novice, but I was far more experienced. In many ways, I was her first in certain aspects. I introduced her to her own sexuality, sharing everything I knew. With me, she explored not just the classics, but everything else. Her style changed too. She began dressing more boldly and tastefully. From being a quiet, unnoticed girl, she blossomed into the charming young woman I had seen in her from the start. We were both students from out of town. Summer arrived, and it was time to part ways. I left, but she stayed behind to work in the admissions office. Our nights were filled with long, passionate conversations, warm, strong hugs, and tender, lingering kisses goodbye. I left feeling completely secure in our relationship. I was happy. And so begins a new chapter in this long, ongoing story. The first month after I left was blissful. Sweet texts from both sides, long evening chats, and counting down the days until our next meeting. After about 35 days, I managed to sneak away for a couple of days. It turned out to be one of the best weekends of my life. When I covered her eyes with my hands, she didn't hesitate for a second to call me by name. She said she'd never mix me up with anyone else. I'll never forget her genuine, light breath, and her eyes closing slowly when, left alone, my hand slipped beneath her light summer dress. We spent the night walking, drinking wine, and getting lost in each other. I left feeling on top of the world, but things quickly changed. After a while, her texts grew increasingly terse and infrequent. My missed calls piled up, and my once warm, familiar voice became cold and distant. Another month went by. It was my birthday, and I returned. She welcomed me with a sweet smile, and we went to my place. But things felt different. She wasn't the same person I had known before. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, she insisted everything was fine. A few days after I left, I got a call thanking me for everything. She didn't want to ruin my holiday by telling me sooner that her feelings had faded. When I asked if she was seeing someone else, she said no. We ended things on friendly terms. Autumn rolled around, and I was back in the city. Naturally, the first thing I wanted to do was catch up with her. I didn't get a clear answer, but it was obvious she'd changed a lot. Her music had shifted to black metal, her style, and even the way she communicated were different. Slowly, bit by bit, I pieced together what had happened after I left. A guy, around my age, had shown up with a guitar, inviting her, and a friend out for beers, just as a casual student hangout. They went. Later, he called her out alone, and she agreed. They strolled through the park, our park, and those walk photos she'd sent me, supposedly taken by a friend, weren't taken by a friend at all. I didn't make a scene, but the resentment remained. I have always appreciated honesty. Despite this, we continued to talk until one day we had a big fight. It was very stormy. I put her on the bus, slammed the door, and left. I haven't seen or heard from her since. 6 months have passed. It all kicked off with a simple text. I still remember it word for word. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I wish you all the best. Be happy." I couldn't resist reaching out to congratulate her. It felt like a personal challenge. But we weren't strangers after all. We began talking again, and I noticed she had changed. Everything that marked her in the fall was gone. The girl I saw in the spring was back. We hadn't seen each other in 2 months, but by the end of February, we decided to catch a movie. We met at the mall, watched a film, and on a whim, ended up kissing. Later, we went back to my place. The transformation was striking. A gray mouse in a winter coat revealed herself to be wearing a light dress, lingerie, and stockings. We woke up together. As they say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that was the start of the path leading to where I am now, as the author of this story. Then it felt like a dream. My feelings for her hadn't disappeared. They'd just been lying dormant beneath a layer of dust. Before long, we were living together. Everything fell into place as it was before, but if anything, it felt deeper. Conversations, confessions, and intimacy became more intense, and our emotions matured. The usual challenges of life didn't shake our relationship. After a year, then 2, then 3, we were still like teenagers in a honeymoon phase. By the time we were in our 4th year of marriage, I had started working, and she was in her final year of university. We decided to get married. But there was something lurking beneath the surface, like lead slowly poisoning our lives, a dark chapter from the past. I tried not to dwell on it, to forget it. If she had been honest from the start, maybe I could have succeeded. But when does life ever make things simple? She denied any real connection with him, saying, "We were just friends." Yes, we hung out. Yes, we spent time together. Yes, we had common interests. But that's it. It's probably time to start a new chapter here. A few years later, I went on a long business trip for 3.5 months. I took my laptop with me. After about a month and a half, I searched for the scanned document and couldn't find it. I've looked through all the image files on the hard drive. Instead, I came across a hidden folder. Inside it was a collection of their messages, every conversation they had, his photos, even the call she made to him. With me, she always had only one call to all her contacts. Yes, it was all old stuff, no photos or records from our time together. But she had kept this correspondence. It was precious to her. And what did I find? I saw how she had humiliated herself, pleading with him to go out with her. How she texted her friends about how heartbroken she was not to be with him for her birthday and New Year's. This was from the period when we had just started talking again. It stung to see that he had chosen his girlfriend over her. At that time, I was working the night shift. A blizzard was raging outside the window, and there was not a soul for hundreds of kilometers around. In the midst of darkness and white silence, I sat staring at the monitor. My soul felt empty, as if a bucket of cold, dirty water had been poured into my face. I called her, and she was crying, professing her love and insisting that she had forgotten to delete the photo she had saved as a keepsake. All she admitted was that that was when she really fell in love with him. She strongly denied any physical relationship with him. I didn't find any proof that she was unfaithful to me after we reconnected. All the correspondence and photos were from before. It wasn't a desire to ruin my family or my love for her that led me to forgive her when I came back. But let's face it, humans are weak. I forgave her in words, but that crack in my soul never healed. It was like an untreated wound that got worse over time. Those seeds of doubt had taken root. Our relationship grew colder, and trust was a distant memory. By that time, my wife was pregnant, and the pregnancy was difficult, with frequent visits to the hospital. I did everything I could to support her, spending my days in the hospital trying to make her life easier. How I managed to keep my job during all the time I was on vacation is nothing short of a miracle. We had a son, and I, who had never been fond of kids before, became a father. I like to think I'm a good one. I was there for him and her through sleepless nights, juggling work and family responsibilities. I took them wherever they needed to go and bought whatever was necessary. It was tough, but I managed. I loved that child with all my heart. As for us, things went downhill. We didn't fight or break things, and I wasn't unfaithful or angry behind her back. On the surface, we looked like a perfect couple, but it was all a facade. The core of our relationship, trust, had vanished. Without it, everything else began to crumble. Intimacy became infrequent, and paranoia and despair set in more often. Soon, I found myself dreading going home. I'd sit in the car for hours or linger in the entrance, staring at the city and pretending I was still at work. Nothing brought me joy anymore, except for the genuine happiness I felt from my son's smile. The final blow came with a month and a half of silence, while his wife and child were visiting their parents for the summer. Returning to my spacious, comfortable 3-room apartment in the evenings, I found myself alone with my thoughts, and it was unbearable. By then, I had already discovered the betrayal of my relatives and the deceitfulness of my friends, but the absence of trust in my own family truly shook me to my core. You know the saying, "My home is my castle." My castle turned out to be a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breeze. In the evenings, when I was left alone, I found myself recalling things I wished I hadn't. I remembered details I'd never seen before or had avoided seeing. For example, on my very first business trip, she posted a social media status saying, "Come and get something." She later claimed it was meant for me. I believed her. During the weekdays when she was at university or work, our intimacy was conservative and required lengthy foreplay. But as soon as we were away from the city for a few days, her desires became insatiable, and she no longer needed any preamble. She attributed it to fatigue. I believed that too. One day, I came home early, but our lock had a peculiar quirk. If you turned it at a certain angle, it wouldn't open with a key. That's exactly what happened this time. I knocked repeatedly, but there was no answer and her phone was off. Anxious, I went outside, peering through the windows, until she eventually called back, claiming she hadn't heard me and that the phone had died. I believed her. Reflecting on all of this, I'm almost certain I wanted to believe in loyalty and devotion, despite the signs. Forgive me for the repetition, but I overlooked the obvious and stubbornly ignored the facts. We've been together for nearly 13 years, and I can't help but feel those years were wasted. All of this happened before our child was born. Since then, I had no reason to doubt, but does that really matter? I still manage to genuinely celebrate the happiness of loved ones and sincerely wish joy to friends and family. I have a nice apartment, a good job, and a car, yet I constantly feel like a second choice, a backup that was only used when things didn't work out elsewhere, deceived and manipulated for someone else's benefit. It's terrifying to doubt and mistrust those closest to you. Deep down, I still have love for her, but it doesn't mean much anymore. The crack that formed years ago has grown into a gaping wound in my heart.